Well, welcome on into the PWHL Puck Drop podcast. And today is a very special day for me, and I hope for you as well, because we have an extra special guest here to kind of talk over the season as a whole. It is a hockey legend and a broadcaster, color commentator, and great defender, Becky Kellar. Welcome in, Becky.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here and talking about hockey again. You know, it seems like the PWHL ended so long ago now, and it was just May, but feel like I'm sure like everybody else, you're kind of missing it.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, there have been some news stories with, free agency and the draft was big. But yeah, we missed the hockey already. It's like, how are we going to get through more months without our favorite sport to watch? But that meanwhile, we're trying to, put things in perspective and do a top 10 storylines from the first historic season, which you were a big part of. And I'm just going to love the idea of getting your thoughts and your perspective on everything that went down in this league. And there were so many storylines. Thank you to the viewers that kind of helped me come up with some that I didn't have and put these in order. And we'll keep you in suspense. We'll work from 10 up to 1. And definitely want Becky to give us her side of things. Before we get started, though, Becky, can you tell us from your side, both as a player and a broadcaster, how the season went for you, just what it felt like, what your experience with the PWHL was like this year?
Yeah, well, I think it was exciting, right? And it felt like a long time in coming. And I was telling someone the other day that the initial conversation that I had ever heard about this having a pro league of some sort was actually back in 97 before the 98 Olympics. So I think that the thought process has been there for a long time. I think the timing was right now, but I think, there's a lot of anticipation in terms of how it would be. Would it be well received? What would the product look like on the ice? And I think it surpassed everybody's expectations. I mean, the fans were spectacular. The fact that they were packing arenas night after night, and it felt like it was getting bigger as the season went. And there's always that thought of maybe it's gonna come out of the gate strong. Everyone's gonna be really interested to see what it looks like, and then the fans will sort of dwindle away, and that wasn't the case at all. So I thought that was pretty exciting. I love the product on the ice. I mean, legitimately, and I know that's one of our topics today. Any team could beat anybody at any time. And yeah, I loved it. I mean, I watched pretty close to pretty much every game, whether I was, in arena in the booth doing the game, or if I was just at home watching on TV. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, you're right. And it didn't lose momentum. I think, going into the playoffs, and we're not going to do any spoilers, but, it only gained momentum, or, seemed like more excitement built because the product on the ice never let us down. I mean, so many overtime, shootout, 1 goal, last second, just dramatic games and great players that made for great storylines. I mean, from the player side, I don't know if you can open up that feeling of what it was like, just the feeling of having been, a foundational player, back in the day, or somebody that, didn't have this in your era. You had, of course, the Olympics and Team Canada, but did that part of it strike you as well during the season?
Yeah, well, and I think, you look at it and you think, wow, it's so fortunate for these players to be coming through at this time. Um, but we had the same kind of milestones throughout my entire career. I came on right at the right time to be able to participate in the first Olympics. And, there's finally an Olympics, and the players before that could have said the same thing with the World Championships. And so I think, you've seen a couple generations of players that felt that they were very fortunate to come into women's hockey at the time that they did, and certainly now. And you look at the number of players that are playing and the opportunities presented. I helped coach a junior team in Burlington, and I look at those players, they're so talented. And they're looking at U Sport and NCAA opportunities and under 18 Team Canada and all these things that didn't exist that long ago. So what a great time. And I don't think it escaped the attention of anyone, or the players especially, that they understood exactly the opportunity that they have been given, and they've really embraced it, I think, in terms of understanding, like, we're role models and we get this chance, and we're going to enjoy it, embrace it, and understand exactly the meaning behind it. And I
Mhm.
thought the players did a great job with that. So available, signing autographs, good with the fans. So I mean, I think they get exactly what this all means, to the players that have come before them and to the young players that have come after them.
Mhm. Yes, that's true enough. You were part of some firsts as well, and that's, those were huge back in the day. That, that got this all up and running. So from fans, we thank you for being part of that. And without further ado, we will just jump into our list, and I'll put them on the screen. But we had to narrow this down because we could have gone a lot of different directions. But this is our choice. So hopefully fans will comment or let me know if they have any more ideas. But we'll start with number 10. And that storyline we're going to call the parody of the league, the close finish, the parody all the way through, where we never had, a wire to wire first place team. Toronto started off so low and jumped up, and it was close right up until the end as far as who made the playoffs. So, what are your thoughts on number 10?
Well, I think if you were to start the league again today with the exact same team, same coaches, same everything, you could have a completely different result. I think, New York's first team that has beat out of playoffs, they come in last place, but that's a team that has the talent that they could have won it,
Hmm.
And so I know, talked to Dave Starman, who did all of their games, and the number of times he said they had no puck luck, and sometimes you create your own luck, but there's a team that at the end of the season they started to get bounces and they started to win games, and you saw what they could have been. The battle for first place, like you said, I mean, Minnesota, who barely eked into playoffs, but sat near the top all season.
Yep.
Um, so I think, there really was parity in the league, which is exactly what you wanted. So you knew every night you went into a game that it was anyone's game and it was going to be a good game. And so the few times you did see blowouts, it was almost fun to see because it was so unusual to see that happen to a team. I think Toronto was one of the great stories of all of that because, at the start of the season, I know we'd had conversations about Toronto and we're like, well, they're going to get Philly, right? Because they
Exactly.
started out so poorly. We're like, oh boy.
Failing for
And
Fillier is what I think I said it in a video, so it's on record that they were not looking so good.
yeah, and I think that a lot of people thought, well, I mean, the upside is, and then they went on that 11-game winning streak, and we saw a completely different team in them, and that could have happened with a lot of teams, I think, and it happened to be Toronto
Mhm.
that did it, and so I think that's what made the league so great was the parity and the quality of play, which is only going to get better when you look at the draft picks
Mhm.
and players that came in from Europe and NCAA and that will come into this league next year, but yeah, I think you any league, that's exactly what you strive for, and they absolutely had it this year across those 6 teams.
Yes, yes, well put. And I'll just tack on the Boston story was pretty interesting as well. That they everyone thought they had such a strong draft, yet they kind of struggled to find chemistry. And then after the World Championships, they just pressed the accelerator and made the playoffs and went all the way to the finals. So you're right. You could do the whole season over and have completely upside down standings and different champion, and that's what we want. That's what we tune in for.
Well, and
Um,
this is why you play the games too, right? Like, I think if you
yeah.
looked at the roster constructions at the start of the year, your prediction for Boston wouldn't have been that they were a team that struggled to score
Hmm.
too, right? And that was their struggle all season long, and yet they still managed to find their way into playoffs and to get past Montreal. But interesting storyline, right? In a team like that, so you never know what you're going to get, and when you put these rosters together. And
Hmm.
but I love the fact that they found a way in the end, despite their sort of lack of offensive production.
Hmm. Yep. And going to be interesting to see Sarah Fillier in New York, and I wouldn't have any doubt that they have a much stronger season and make the playoffs. So that's this year's upcoming. We just again can't wait to get started. And let's go to number 9, which is a kind of a broad one, but we're calling it the physicality, which took some people by surprise.
Yeah, well, they said they wanted to allow more hitting, and boy, did they ever. And I think it took some of us by surprise too, exactly what they allowed. I mean, it was a full contact game by the end. I sometimes think there was more hitting than in the NHL,
Mm-hmm.
but I think, the players had said they wanted it. I think it was a learning curve, especially for your more skilled players. Um, but I think you saw by the end of the season that they were getting it, and they were figuring out like a Taylor Heisey. I think for players like that, it takes some time. You haven't been hit that way before to figure out how to play within that.
Mm-hmm.
And you were starting to see that they were figuring that out by the end of the year. So I think you'll see that with the new draft picks coming in as well. It's going to take some time coming out of the NCAA to
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to play with that much body contact. But one of those things that I think across the board fans loved as well. And I think it drew in fans that it wouldn't necessarily have drawn in. And I know I'd have conversations with my parents, and I grew up in a small town. And the number of times my mom had said to me, I was talking to so and so, and I just couldn't even believe it. They're watching women's hockey. And I think the physicality was part of it, that they watch it and they go, wow, that's really good hockey. And we like that side of it. So I think it was good from that perspective, because you want to broaden your fan base if you're going to get the numbers in the rinks every day, the viewers on TV. And I think that was a part of the reason that they were able to do that. But I do think, definitely a learning curve for everyone involved. Some
Mm-hmm.
players, it came more easily than others. And you see some of the ones that said, oh yeah, I played boys hockey growing up. And so they had learned how to hit and they knew. And for others, it was a matter of figuring it out in game, but they seem to do it quite well.
Yeah, I mean, as a defender, you were probably itching to kind of have a chance to play that way. It wasn't quite that physical back then. Do you think it was too physical? Some people, I made a video where I just asked the question, got a lot of responses both ways.
Yeah, I think it was a learning curve for the officials as well, coming into a women's hockey that had previously not really allowed any of that. So I think, the officials started to get better at figuring out what to call. But I
Mhm.
do think they need to establish what the fine line is, because they don't want the physicality to take away from offense, right? Because we want to see goals and we want to see offensive production. So I think that's something that they still sort of have to figure out. And initially, it was supposed to be hitting along the wall,
Mhm.
not open ice. And I believe that the defining feature of it all too was that the players were supposed to be moving in the same direction.
Mhm.
So you don't want to see players doing this, which is where your injuries come in too, right? If you're going to see an injury, a concussion, it tends to be people moving perpendicular.
Mhm.
If they're moving the same direction, usually it becomes a rub out. Even if you knock the player over, there's usually no injury to it. So I think they're still figuring that out. Because yeah, like I said, there were times where I did think maybe the hitting was, again, if it was taking away from some of the skill, then was taking away a little bit from the offense. So I would imagine it's something they're still talking about, because I think they'd probably like to see more offensive production, especially in the playoffs. Things they got tightened up a little
Really
bit
good.
defensively, and so you weren't seeing the goal scoring. So part of that
Mhm.
could be that. So yeah, but I mean, all in all, I do think it was a positive, and I think it was a positive from a viewer's perspective for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, we will move on to our number 8 storyline, and we're going to call this just the PWHL as a business, the challenges, the successes. Some of the challenges. Well, I had arenas noted down. And how did from your side of things, you probably also, got a lot of inside information somewhat, or, got to see it close up. And it was a success story for the most part. There were some challenges.
Yeah, I think and I'm not in the inner circle of all this, so this is just an outside perspective that I'm giving, because I certainly wouldn't know, a Jana Hefford would be on here and be able to give you more. But from an outside perspective, I would say a couple of things that they're probably addressing is New York. Where do they put New York? Because
Mhm.
they struggled at the time with attendance, whereas, your Canadian teams, Minnesota, definitely didn't. But you're right in terms of arenas, because things were it was a last minute um introduction into the league. I think they, in certain places where they were in arenas that just happened to be available at the time. So you look at Toronto, and Mattamy was great, but definitely they could use a bigger venue. The fan base is there, and those are things they didn't necessarily know.
Hmm.
You look at Mattamy, and at the start of the year, you might have thought that's perfect, right? That's
Yeah.
exactly what you want. And it turns out it wasn't. It was small, and Boston not being in Boston, New York not being in New York, and so searching for homes there. Even with Montreal, do you play at Verdun, or do you go out to um,
Wow.
Laval? And so obviously Verdun again is small, it's older, but it's in Montreal. So those are
Mhm.
questions obviously that they're gonna, from a business perspective, have to figure out. I know there was both sides of that, especially again for Montreal, where it's like we're Montreal, we're not Laval, but Laval's got the better venue for them. So
Mhm.
yeah, it'll again be interesting to see where they go with that. I think there's some really good opportunities business wise, especially given that they're going to release the names of all the teams, which I think
Right.
everyone is very eager to see. And with that comes an unbelievable opportunity for merchandise,
Yeah.
right? Because I can imagine everyone that has their, Toronto or their Montreal t-shirts or jerseys, they're going to want something new,
Yeah.
right? You're going to want to buy something else. So there's going to be some fans that maybe held off, knowing that if I wait till next season, then the good stuff's coming. So I think there's lots of opportunity, and I think they're going to be all over that, and I think that's fantastic. Um,
Yeah.
I think they did a good job in terms of getting their broadcast out there, having that picked up. So from a business perspective, I think that was excellent, and the fact that it was on YouTube, so you could watch anywhere at any time, really gave them a lot of reach. So I thought that was fantastic as well. But again, not being on the business side of things, I'm just going based on sort of my perspective as
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
viewer and fan.
Yeah. Those were, easier things to pick up on. And as you said, the merchandising, I think, is an opportunity that will certainly only get better in year two when they get names and logos. I mean, people like myself wanted those original six jerseys, and now we're certainly going to want, the real names and logos. And that's sort of, someone said, I think it might have even been Stan Caston on the call with Jaina, saying that calling the teams PWHL Toronto and PWHL Montreal kind of backed them in, it wasn't planned, but got everybody saying the name of the league and kind of helped that visibility, which turned out to be, whether planned or unplanned, a good thing for sure. Do you think the single owner kind of situation is affecting things too much? We've seen some storylines that where there's some difficulties, anything like that for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something I've given a lot of thought to, other than the fact that I think right now that's what's going to help keep parity across the league, right? You're going to have every team's got the same amount of money allocated. Every team's got, right? And so, because you'd hate for a situation where you go, all right, look at our three Canadian franchises. They've made X number of dollars, so they got more money to spend on players, and so you don't want to lose that within the league. So I think right now it's probably the way to go, and whether it'll always stay that way remains to be seen. But I think, for now to start, it's
Mhm.
probably the best model that they could hope to have. And it's nice to see that the league is in a position too where they're doing this on their own, right? In terms of like they're their own entity, as opposed to say the WNBA with the NBA. It's kind of nice to see that they're going to do this and hopefully be
Mhm.
able to make a go of it on their own.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's we like the parody, and it keeps things a little more streamlined, so there, like you said, there aren't sort of different opportunities or things because of, getting fans all comfortable in all six markets. All right, so moving on to number seven, and this one was just an interesting storyline that caught everybody's attention because it was so successful, which was the first trade in PWHL history, which wasn't just a minor trade. It was, well thought out by both GMs at the time. Sophie Jakes going from Boston to Minnesota, and Susanna Tapani in return from Minnesota to Boston. What were your thoughts on that one?
Well, I loved it. And I loved it from a standpoint too that, you watch the NHL and you don't necessarily see these kinds of trades anymore. You're more likely to see a team that is selling off players, and in return they're getting just draft picks or money or whatever the case may be. So see an actual exchange of two top end players, just one for one. Um, was pretty awesome. And then just to see how those players um, managed all of it, and how, I mean, you look at Sophie Jakes, and um, it wasn't a great start to the season for her, and obviously a much better fit when she got to Minnesota. You started to see the player that I think everyone thought she could be and expected her to be. And I mean, she was fantastic for Minnesota, especially through playoffs. And Minnesota needed an offensive defender, and she got the opportunity to be that, where I think maybe when she was with Boston, she was
Mhm.
playing sort of in the shadow maybe of a Megan Keller, and she wasn't getting the same opportunity. And reverse, Tapani going to Boston, they needed more offensive production up front, and so she helped to give them a little bit of that and give them more depth up front. And so I thought it was a great trade. It was fun to see it again, fun to see two, sort of bigger name players, just straight exchange, switch jerseys, switch cities, and then to see them play against each other as well. When it came down, to the
The
final
final.
playoffs, and that was pretty exciting as well, because you knew there's two motivated players to show
Mhm.
their former teams. I think especially Sophie Jakes, because I wondered when that trade happened. And again, I don't know. I'm not privy to this information, but you wondered if Boston had sort of given up on her
Yeah.
in 7 games, kind of thought, well, okay, maybe your game's not going to translate from the NCAA into this. Maybe you won't be that player. And so maybe we'll just make this swap right now while we can still get something for you, something really good for you. Um, and then obviously she becomes the player that everyone had hoped that she would be.
Yeah, she blossomed. And in the playoffs, especially Tapani with those two overtime game-winning goals in that crazy series against Montreal. You know, you had to feel good for her as well, to have those moments. She's a veteran on the world stage, and I remember asking her about the trade early on, and it. I'm sure it was an adjustment. It was something they'd never experienced because we've never had a league like this. So, it went both ways for the veteran to feel like a team might be giving up on her as well. And trying to fit in with a new group, and then I was really happy to see that as well. And Jake's, like you said, she actually had 5 points in the 10 playoff games and thought she scored the Walter Cup winning goal in that, was that double overtime or maybe just
Yeah, I
single?
believe it
But
was.
she's the one that put the puck in the net,
Yeah.
and it was.
And can I tell you, I was on the panel for that. And so
Uh-huh.
where they had the panel set up, her dad was sitting just down the row from us. So as soon as that goal went in, I looked down at him, and it was so funny. And I've always heard, my parents say sometimes it's stressful to be in the stands as a parent. You're not there just having a great time. You're actually stressed for your child. And I looked down at him, and his daughter just scored the overtime winning goal, and he literally did this. And then he went, yes. But that first moment, his reaction was just relief. I
Relief.
felt so bad when it was called back, not even for her and the team, but for him. So, nice to see that it eventually worked out for her. And I know he was in attendance at the final game, the game 5 as well in Boston. But yeah, pretty interesting, just to be able to see that from that perspective too. Because you look at these women and where, at players and what they've done. And sometimes you forget about the families that
Hmm.
have supported them and got them there. And I know probably every player was in the same boat with having a parent or a family member in the stands
Hmm.
who was a little bit stressed out, but it was kind of funny to see.
That's so interesting. See, insight. I knew we'd get the scoop from that. You're right. It's good for her, and that was a crazy moment. That I'm gonna later on do a video of specific moments. That's why those aren't on here. These are more, global storylines. So that one will definitely be on the list. Don't, no need to worry there. So we'll move on to our number 6 storyline, which is what everybody's come to know and love as the jailbreak goal. And that it just was a storyline. It started off, I don't even think it had that name, but became a real highlight.
Yeah, and I don't know who originally gave it that name. I'm not sure if it wasn't if it was a Kenzie and a Pounder thing. I don't remember, but I know it, or maybe it was Pounder and Daniela in the very first game. But yeah, I know once it was said, it just stuck. And here's the funny thing, and I'll tell you, my kind of funny story after broadcasting one of the games, and I come home and go to bed, wake up the next morning, and my husband goes, Yeah, I got one problem with the broadcast. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Right. We just woken up. I'm all groggy. I don't even know what's going on. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning. I go, what do you mean you have a problem with the broadcast? He goes, I have been watching hockey for like my whole life, and I have never heard anyone talk about this jailbreak thing you got. He didn't realize what the rule was. And so he thought we just made up some term.
Yeah.
I go, no, it's a unique rule to this league. He hadn't realized it. So I had to explain it to him, which was pretty funny. So now whenever I get the opportunity around the house, even I just throw the term jailbreak out there just to, just to see what reaction I get out of them. But I think this is the beauty of a league like this is it's brand new and you can kind of do with it what you want. I said to someone before, I don't think this would go in the NHL because they've got 100 years of tradition. I don't
Right.
think you just start throwing out radical rule changes. But the PWHL is brand new. And so you can do these kind of things. And I think the fans love it.
Mhm.
And it was a lot of fun, I think, to have that potential, and we saw it in one of the games too, where you're on a power play and you pull your goalie,
Yeah.
and it almost becomes kind of a dangerous thing because
Yeah.
then the opportunity to score shorthanded really is there. You can
Mhm.
ice the puck, without being penalized, and then the opportunity then to break that player out. It happened in one of the playoff games, I believe. So I just thought it added an extra kind of interesting element. Love to see that when someone did score a shorthanded goal, the first thing they did was skate to the player coming out of the penalty box, which
Mhm.
always made me laugh because that person had nothing to do with the shorthanded goal, but you wanted to celebrate with them right away.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it's again, it's one of the things that a new league has the opportunity to do, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's so funny. Your husband thought, you're not calling the game correctly or you're making up something that
Yeah,
doesn't belong, but guess what? It is
yeah.
exclusive and it's I mean, it's so beloved now. I'm sure there are t-shirts I've seen and it's nice that every team did have at least one. Looking at my stats, Montreal only had one, but they did get one. I don't remember who that was. I'm sure the viewers will let us know. Toronto and Ottawa both had three. I think Emma Malte might have had two. If I remember correctly, one of hers was an empty net shorthanded goal. So you're right, they pulled the goalie. I'll have to look that up. But yeah, and it changed penalty killing and power play strategy just a little bit, I think, for the coaches as well.
Yeah, because I mean it's bad enough to have a shorthanded goal scored on you, but then when that shorthanded goal also eliminates your power play,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it definitely changes things. Now, with that being said, I don't think when you're killing a penalty that you can go out there thinking we're going to score a shorthanded goal because obviously got to play right and you don't want to be cheating on the offense. And but when the opportunity presents itself, you go, and that's where a penalty killer like Malte becomes an extra element of dangerous because of her speed, and she'll get in on the forecheck on the penalty kill as well when she reads the opportunity and kind of wreak havoc on the other team. And so yeah, it was again one of those things that you're looking from a fan experience, and that just makes it that much more fun for fans. You can hear them in the crowd when you cross the blue line, and it might not even be a great offensive opportunity, but you can see the crowd's like ooh, and
Mm-hmm.
it starts to get energized by the potential
Mm-hmm.
score a shorthanded goal.
Yeah, not even just a shorthanded goal, but yeah, I think you're right. It was like here comes a really big opportunity, and it's a great decision. I love that rule, and you're right. I think the NHL would have a hard time instilling that, but I think they might look at the PWHL with a little jealousy that we have that rule because it's made things really exciting and just hope to see more of that. So we'll try to keep moving here, folks. Our number 5 storyline, generally attendance records and the way that they fell, starting with the first record at TD Place all the way up to the what. We'll let Becky kind of maybe take us through some of that. I know you called the game in Detroit, which I'm sure was among the leading attendance, but the records were kind of broken in succession, which was really interesting.
Yeah, and I called the Bell Center game, and I
Yeah,
mean
yeah,
that one was unbelievable, and then happened to be at the Scotiabank Arena game as well because I was on the panel for that one.
right.
Um, I mean, I just think those were moments again where, as a player, as a former player, you just literally had to take a second and sit back and just appreciate, you know, what was going on. And you look at Scotiabank and Bell Center specifically because they were both sold out, and you're not selling out to a corporate crowd. You're selling out to you sort of your everyday person and fans and teams and kids and people that are loud. And so, I've been to Scotiabank many, many times. I
Mhm.
go and watch Leaf games. This was a different experience. And so just the passion and, fortunately in that one, the home team won because it's kind of nice to
Mhm.
give that crowd the home win. That isn't what happened at Bell Place, but it was a spectacular game.
Mhm.
And you'd heard Marie-Philippe Poulin talk about how they had played at the Bell Center
Mhm.
previously with the CWHL, and basically no one was in the crowd. And so, what a moment for those players to have experienced both ends of that. But I think there's an opportunity too for the league where I think you look at subsequent seasons and you look next year and you go, okay, you want to play in an appropriate size venue, but then give yourself 1 or 2 games a year or maybe more at these big arenas on special days and see if you can continue to fill them. And um what a great opportunity, and just again so much fun. And I think that's one of the things I look at this league and I'm like, oh, that was fun, the jailbreak was fun, this was fun. And again, from a fan perspective, you're like, this was a really enjoyable experience because there were so many of these different marks that you hit where you're like, that was
Mhm.
great. And these games were part of that. And the ones in the US as well that broke US records, where you
Mhm.
had again some really great crowds of just kids and families. And it affords you that opportunity too. Like, can you take an entire family or an entire team to an NHL game? Not around here. And I live in
Right.
Toronto, right?
Mhm.
And so you got that opportunity to go see these women play. And one of the things that really struck me, and I forget what game it was at, it might have been a playoff game. The camera pans the crowd, and quite often they'll go to a group of little girls in their jerseys. But at one point, they actually went to a group of boys in
Mm.
their jerseys, like a team of boys.
Mhm.
And that's when I thought, you know what? That's if you're getting that kind of fan support, that's when you're really starting to make it, because you're not just you're not in your lane anymore. You've switched over and you're getting this bigger group of bigger fan base. And so that was a pretty special moment too to see that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, the I guess it was called the battle at the top officially for the Bell Center game.
Yeah.
And I have it here in front of me. So I think the first record was in Ottawa, kind of just a big crowd at a medium arena with about 8,300 fans. And then 4 days later at the Excel Energy Center, a crowd of 13,316. So that broke the record. And I think that is still the US record. 19,000 plus at Scotiabank on February 16th. To me, I don't know. I guess being Canadian and knowing, like you said, knowing Scotiabank and seeing the difference in the way it felt that was just a huge one for me. I guess, being a little biased, hometown. But then Montreal with the bigger arena was able to smash that record. And that's still the all-time record for attendance at a women's hockey game, pro Olympics, anything, 21,105. So what a moment for everybody. And like you said, for Poulin to take in that moment, that could be one of our individual moments. That was amazing. Just so happy for that. So we'll move on. I mean, you touched on this a little bit, but our number 4 storyline is the fan reception. And like you said, the faces in the crowd and the way the league was received.
Yeah, and it's again one of those things where you start this league and you wonder, like, how many people are out there that are going to actually come to games and watch games. And I think it was not surprising, I guess, for everyone, but it was very encouraging to see the number of people that um, really embraced this league and were very into it. And you'd run into people in the street that would n- know details about it, so it wasn't just, oh yeah, I've heard about this and it's happened. And and one of the moments, I think, for me, we were going to a game. Danielle and I were doing the game in Ottawa early in the season. And we got into an Uber to go over to the game. And the Uber driver was, I'm not sure where he was originally from. He was a newer Canadian, had an accent, he was a soccer guy,
Mhm.
because we were talking to him, but he knew about the league. He's like, our team in Ottawa, we're great. And what the heck is wrong with Toronto? And he was right. And so that's how early it was. And he was going on. And I thought, wow, Like, this is some guy driving an Uber. He's a soccer fan, but he knows all this stuff. And so, I mean, to me, it had a little bit of the feel of, walking around the streets in Toronto talking about the Leafs, like
Yeah.
where everybody knows. I was really surprised at the reach that the league had and how many people were watching and knowledgeable. And because you got your core fan base, and but again, to make a pro league go, you need more than that.
Mhm.
And so you were starting to see that these people that you didn't necessarily expect to
Mhm.
become fans were entertained and were watching, and new players. That was the other thing too, right?
Mhm.
People that could actually, in the past in women's hockey, people didn't really know. They knew that they may know a couple names, but the number of people that would start to talk about a third liner, a backup goaltender. I mean, people knew, and so that was impressive as well.
Yeah, I loved that. And I think it was Cheryl Pounder who remarked after a certain number of games, maybe a couple weeks into the season, now we're not talking about all the history and the firsts. Now it's about the hockey, and that is just a unique, you know, it used to be the Olympics and the World Championships, these shorter tournaments, would catch people's attention. But this league got here, we got used to, wow, that's so cool. And then, like you said, people were talking about hockey and why isn't this team winning? And, it just, I can tell you my experience from my own, YouTube and podcasting that, I thought it would be, just something that certain women's hockey fans would want to talk about. And it's blown up to just so many different people in the community with strong opinions about who got drafted and whether a team's going to fall off. I mean, arguing and like, to me, there's nothing better than just talking hockey and appreciating great performances and competitiveness. And then let alone with just the autographs and throwing pucks and signs and just seeing the faces in the crowd, like you said. That's so interesting about the boys team as well, because it has been a really good mix of types of people, ages, genders.
Yeah,
Okay, let's go. Oh, go ahead if you have a thought.
Oh, no, just that it's really starting to become a broader fan base, and you're starting to see
Mhm.
just a lot of people, and it's, appreciate it. And you're right, in the back and forth and the arguments, and yeah, that stuff's great.
Yeah, nothing better. So let's start an argument with our number three storyline. I will say the best player. I don't think you can really argue. She won all the awards. Our own Natalie Spooner, who had just an epic season. And there's so many ways you could look at this. The first, and I'll let you, I'll let you talk about, a Team Canada fellow alum, Natalie Spooner.
Yeah, she was fantastic this year, and I don't think, well, clearly nobody expected it because, she wasn't an original three signing, and she was, and I know that she was given I forget what the
Compassionate circumstances.
passionate circumstance, yeah, to go to Toronto, but based on where she went is where everyone in the league must have agreed that she should
Mhm.
be in terms of the draft. And so nobody expected her to have this season. So pretty amazing. And really for me, it was the fact that she just really put the team on her back when they needed to dig themselves out of that hole, the first 5 games that they had struggled so badly. And she really did that. And through those 11 games, through that 11-game win streak, she was just fantastic. You have to wonder if things wouldn't have maybe turned out differently for Toronto in the playoffs had she not been injured. And obviously, that's a big concern I got to think for them right now in terms of next season, because knee injuries, they haven't said completely how long she'll be out, but she certainly won't be starting the season with the team, and hopefully she's back at some point next year. But yeah, I just think it was impressive. And we talked to Troy Ryan early in the season about her, and I, you love to hear these stories about players where he'd said, for you get to a certain age as a player, and you got to sometimes find ways to modify your game, to change, to grow in order to stay on Team Canada or still be productive in a league like this or whatever. And she had done that work. And one of the areas that she got very good at was net front and her hand-eye coordination, a few things like that. And she's tough, big body to move when she goes net front. And you could see that, right? She's dangerous down there, from the hand-eye to tipping shots that are coming in from the point, to picking up rebounds, to just battling hard. And obviously a power forward. She's very successful that way as well. But just a fantastic season. And you look at the who she beat out for MVP and top forward in terms of like Carpenter and Poulin is the best player in the world
Mhm.
still. I don't think you would argue that. And she was able to put together a season that beat out those players. So extremely impressive and so huge for Toronto in terms of how their season progressed.
Yeah, yeah, but she, she scored the first goal. She scored, I think, the first overtime, or I don't know, first playoff goal, first hat trick. She, like you said, when they were not winning and not scoring, she just went ahead and did it. And she did credit Coach Ryan after she won all the awards with, helping her be herself, play her game, not try to play something outside of that power forward role. And so whatever that chemistry was, it it worked. It was amazing. So that was our number 3 storyline. And then we'll move to number 2, which we're just going to generally say the playoffs and the overtime games and the overtime goals that weren't, 3 overtime games, at least one, I think 2 double overtime games. That's our number 2.
Yeah, well, the playoffs didn't disappoint in terms of that, and I mean, it was pretty incredible, and I think really what it did, especially in playoffs, was start to show you who had depth, and I think that
Mhm.
hurt Montreal ultimately, right? And Aaron Ambrose played 60 minutes one game, and that I believe is the triple overtime game, and so, but what a story it was through playoffs, and a bit of a nail biter, sitting on the edge of your seat. Not to mention the fact that Toronto had that one game where they scored within the last minute. It was
Yeah,
game 2
yeah.
against Minnesota. So, you're this close to overtime. The games are all that close. We've talked about the parity in the league, and you saw that in playoffs as well. And I think what you also saw was some goaltenders really step up and be stories, and specifically in Boston. And that really, Franco, got them to where they were. And I think without her, Montreal takes that series absolutely easily because they were the better team throughout
Mhm.
the series, and just couldn't seem to figure out a way past her. And but yeah, I mean, I don't think we expected to see that many overtime games. And then, of course, you're looking at a situation where most of these women haven't played or haven't played in a number of years, which is 5-on-5 overtime, right? So when you go into the season and it's 3-on-3, the game's likely going to end. There's going to be a goal. It's not going to last that long, and all of a sudden you're in playoffs. You're exhausted. The season's longer than any season you've ever played, since you maybe were a little kid. And now all of a sudden you're in 5-on-5 overtime that just keeps going and going and going. And so, the fatigue factor for some of these players must have just been off the charts, especially in Montreal, who really leaned heavily on their, top 4 defenders and their top 2 lines, and their fourth line, the one game didn't play at all. And so, probably a something to take away from that for Montreal too is going into next year. I would imagine that they're going to want to have a little more faith in their depth, and
Mhm.
I would imagine that they will based on how they've drafted. So, but yeah, and then of course when those overtime winning goals go in, there's a little bit of relief, like oh my God, like 'cause we weren't sure how long some of those games were going to go. But then the excitement, because when you score an overtime winner, it's pretty awesome. And to see, and you look at Annalena Mueller, and she scored that one in Minnesota and just skated right off the ice. So you never know what kind of emotion you're going to see, what kind of celebration you're going to see. That one was pretty good. I think she's just like, let's go, girls. We're not celebrating in front of their fans, but let's have a moment. And that one was pretty special too.
Yeah, think that was my favorite. I mean, that was after the disallowed goal. Yeah, and so that was so dramatic. And you're right that everybody was talking about. She just, I guess, it reminded us of Matthew Tkachuk from the year before in the NHL when he was just like, "Let's go, let's get out of town," and series is still on. And anyway, that was crazy. In the Montreal games, just unbelievable, as you said. And I mean, so many stories you could debate, whether decisions were made correctly and how heartbreaking for teams to lose those overtime games on the other side of it. It's so full of drama, and the playoffs were, again, just they never let us down. It just kept on, the gift that keeps on giving, I guess. And then We're going to talk about our number one storyline. I don't know if I have a drum roll, but if you hear it, I might add one. Why don't you say what this one is, Becky, and tell us the number one storyline of the PWHL?
Yeah, the very first game on January 1st, and how many eyes were on that game? Like so many people were watching. In Canada, it was picked up by TSN, CBC Sportsnet, like it was on everything. And I think everyone just and there was the curiosity with that first game. Like, what is this all gonna look like? What's the hockey gonna look like? What are the teams gonna look like? And funny that New York won that game 4-0, and then everything just sort of flip-flopped by the end of the season in terms of Toronto being the best team and New York at the bottom of the barrel. And it didn't look like that off the top. You thought, wow, this New York team, they've got offense, they're really coming. But I do think in that first game, you did start to see a little bit too of what Toronto could be, because they had, I think it was the second period, just dominant. But yeah, I just think the excitement around that first game and the emotion around that first game, from the players' perspective to all the people that had worked so hard to get that on the ice, even to us as former players, to see that this is something that is eventually going to happen. And there's been other leagues and there's been other pro leagues, but you could tell right from the start that this one was different. This was the first time I think that you had not all of, but the majority of the best players, at least in North America, the ones that were out of school. Before, we've had leagues where it's like all the best Canadians were there and all the best Americans were in this league. And this is the first time where that really joined, and you started to see some of the Europeans come in, and this year it's going to be even more. And so for that to be on display on January 1st at that game in Toronto, the only thing I think we all would have liked to have seen is Toronto score a goal in
Oh.
that one, I think, for the home fans. But what a moment. But I do think Cheryl was right in terms of your ability to move past that. That game was all about, this is a first, this is historic, this is a first, and it was. And you wanted to take the moment to appreciate that. Same thing in the January 2nd game in Ottawa.
Mhm.
But I do love the fact that as the season progressed, we could move away from that storyline and just be like, all right, tonight is Toronto against New York. And we're
Right.
going to talk about these teams and these players and what they've done this season. So I appreciate those games for what they were, but do love the fact that we got to move past that storyline.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's like the celebratory moment, and of course it has to take, top spot as just this is it. Were you emotional? I mean, I know the puck drop was emotional for many people with Jana Hefford and Billie Jean King at center ice. The first goal by Ella Shelton, you know, as you said, it would have been nice for the home crowd to get a goal, but that was emotional for many folks.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, it's just I mean it was the launching point, and I think you started to see what the league could be. And even leading into that, when they'd announced Toronto's already sold out all their home games.
Right.
And I know it was a smaller venue, but I think that was a moment too where you went, wow, okay, well, people are going to come. So it's a good start. Um, and then to see the number of viewers
Hmm.
that day, throughout the networks in Canada, US, and then on YouTube. And I think that was sort of blew everyone away too, that the fact that, I mean, okay, wow, people showed up at the rink, but they were really watching. And then the fact that that continued, because you could see it in a one game where there's the curiosity, and then, that's all it is, and then it goes away. But I think that first game started to build fans and people that said, hey, you know what, I watched that game and I enjoyed it and it was entertaining. And I want to come back. And the reality is that's what pro sports are, right? It's entertainment. And so can you keep these fans entertained every night? And I think that first game was, again, the launching point, and then really showed that yes, you can, and it is entertaining. And we've talked about all the reasons why, in terms of the parity and the level of play and the jailbreak goal and all these things that made for a fun viewing experience, whether you're live or you're watching on TV.
Hmm. Yeah, you summed it up perfectly. I mean, the first game, just we appreciate it, and then on to a great, great season. And next season, we're going to have even more. We're going to have a 30-game season for each team. And I know we need to wrap up. Is there anything just quickly about about next season that you're looking forward to, or that we need to know about what your plans are?
Yeah, well, hopefully, broadcasting the games again, and I can't wait for the second season because I thought the first season was great and I thought the level of play was great. But when you watch the draft picks and the players that have come into the league for next year, I mean, it's getting that much better, and the depth on all these teams, um, it is going to be incredible. I really can't wait to see the rookies in the league and how they do. There's so much anticipation around your Filliers and Serdaknis and some of the European players coming in. I mean, I just can't wait to see those players hit the ice. For me and Megan Carter, who came to my
Oh,
hockey
yeah.
school, Cheryl and I's hockey school for years, right, as a little kid. And so the fact that she's in this league, can't wait to watch, can't wait to watch her play as well. So yeah, a lot of excitement and anticipation, and ready for it to start. I'm enjoying summer, I gotta say, wearing shorts and but I can't wait for hockey to start again.
Yeah, it's a look, you got to enjoy this while you can, but it'll go fast, I think. And yeah, I'll put that on the screen. I've noted that, Megan Carter already is near and dear because of her connection to you two, and she, credits you as her role models. And so I'm sure you both will have, great sentiment watching and calling the games that she's playing. And that's another great storyline. Maybe we'll have that next season. All right, Becky, I know you need to get off to your next meeting, and you've made time for us today. It's so appreciated. I know that this has just been fun talking hockey with you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll see you next season on the broadcast, and hopefully you'll rejoin us where we can talk a little more in depth. But just thank you so much again for the time today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.